When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. At American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.
This is Scott Becker, and we're joined today. We've got a special combined episode of the Becker's Healthcare Podcast and the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. We're joined today by a fantastic leader. We're joined by Lou Shapiro, and I'll let Lou give you more of the background, but just to give you a few quick keynotes. Served as the CEO of Hospital for Special Surgery, HSS, for almost 18 years. They ran a streak of 15 years as the highest ranked musculoskeletal hospital or health system in the country or world for 15 of those 18 years in a row, almost like the old New York Yankees, the Bronx Bombers. He's also a former McKinsey consultant from back in the day. He retired, if you could call it that, but left a fantastic team in place at HSS. And retired is the wrong word, because now he serves on the boards of several different companies. And we're going to talk today about a variety of subjects, but the one I want to touch on the most is the key to high-performing organizations. Lou, I've done some justice to the intro. Could you say a few words yourself to tell people about you a little bit as well, and what you do and what you're doing?
Yeah. Thanks for including me again, Scott. It's always enjoyable to spend time with you. So I guess the best way to start is to say that I'm extremely grateful for the life I've had the privilege of living so far. Yesterday was my birthday, by the way. I had a pretty big milestone number, turned 65, so it's sort of an opportunity to just sort of pause and think back about everything that has enabled me to get to this point. In terms of gratitude, top of the list, grateful for just an amazing family, my wife, my daughter, my son-in-law, my brother and his family. It's just, after a certain period of time, you realize, I think you always realize how important that is, but even though you realize how important it is, sometimes it takes a backseat to your professional life, and now it's just really feel just completely filled with gratitude for the family and the love that we have and the opportunity we have to live life to its fullest. So grateful for that. Grateful for an amazing career. Had four main jobs, if you will, over the course of my career. What is now referred to as Allegheny Health Network is where I began my career. A number of roles that I played in that organization for a little bit more than a dozen years. And that was sort of part one. Part two and three were time at McKinsey and Geisinger. That was great. Great experiences. Learned a lot. Hopefully made some contributions on the way. And then sort of the final chapter of that phase of my career, being having the privilege of being in the role of CEO at HSS for 17 years. Maybe you could round up to the higher number, 18 years, 17 years at HSS was just, just look back and think, wow, what a privilege to have had that kind of run, and the people that I've had the opportunity to meet, all the things that I've learned, and everything that the people that I've worked with accomplished along the way. I'll just pause there for a second. I think that's pretty much that got me up to the point of deciding that it was time to close that chapter of my professional life and move on with this phase where I can spend more time with the first thing that I'm grateful for, my family and me. I can spending time on things that are important to me, personally, and then also figuring out what the next phase is of my professional career where I could still contribute to what is still a much needed set of changes in the healthcare industry, so people can better focus on their health and be better taken care of when they're sick.
Thank you very, very much. And let me stop by first saying happy birthday to you. You're now eligible for Medicare. I'll ask you the fascinating question to start with. Will you choose Medicare Advantage or not for yourself and your family? Where are you at on that?
1,000%. I will not choose Medicare Advantage.
Thank you. That's the kind of straightforward answer that I love from Lou Shapiro. Thank you. So the next question I have for you is, we'll get to this in a second, because I know you're also serving on several private and public company boards now, including some philanthropic boards too, or foundation boards, I believe. When you look across your career, Allegheny Health, McKinsey, HSS, now serving on boards where you see different things, any sort of common trends amongst high-performing organizations?
Yeah, I think so. And this is something that I developed a strong point of view on through the first, let's say, 50 to 60% of my career, and then tried to apply it strongly at HSS. And now looking back and looking at what I'm doing now, looking elsewhere, I think the foundation of a high performing organization, and high performing, Scott, means not high performing in a specific period of time, but over the course of time. Anyone can win, generally speaking. We're in football season. Any team can beat any team on any given day, right? Look, the Steelers lost to the Browns. Not yesterday, but a couple of weeks ago. The question is, a high-performing organization is an organization whose high performance can withstand the test of time and is durable to changes in business cycles and external events that are challenges for the organization. And I think that the first characteristic and most important characteristic of a high-performing organization is having a foundation of a strong culture. And culture means different things depending upon who's talking about it. But from my point of view, culture means that the people who work in the organization and do the important work of the organization are passionate about its purpose and feel that the role they play in the organization, regardless of what it is, whether it's cleaning whatever needs to be cleaned, or taking care of patients or science, regardless of the role, they feel that their contribution is relevant to the organization achieving its purpose, right? They have to be like all in, as if they were owning the organization. So creating that kind of culture, which on one hand isn't rocket science, on the other hand is still hard to do, is foundational. Without that, you may be successful, but you won't be anywhere near as successful as you can be. So that's foundational. Second thing is leadership. People at all levels of the organization need to be able to lead. And that could be people on the front line who aren't leaders by their designation, but they're leaders by their behavior and how they buy into the internalize the purpose, or frontline leadership, or middle management, or senior leadership, or board leadership. Having leadership that is capable and aligned is second. I would say third is, what any industry does is hard, and there's work that needs to be done that's complicated, that artificial intelligence and technology doesn't completely solve for. So you need talented people, and you need people. Every organization is a little different, but you need, however you want to characterize that in your organization, you need talented people. That's number three. And then I would say number four is you need to have I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Let's call it a game plan, or a strategic plan, or a balance, or an operating plan, or a balanced scorecard that guides you, that allows you to say, okay, we're at point A today. Our aspiration is point B. And how do we get there? How do we get from where we are today to where we want to be? And that game plan is multifactorial. It's complicated. It has strategy elements. It has financial elements. It has, labor elements to it. It has efficiency elements to it. But how do you get there? Where are you? Where you want to go? All the things you need to do to get there, and how you align that plan with the culture, with the leadership, with the talent. I think if you could put all those things together, you have a chance to be, I'll use your words, high performing.
And so let me take you through this, because you point to four different things, and I couldn't agree with you more. Culture, leadership, talent, and a game plan or strategy, those four things. One of the things that's become part of the culture today is this constant discussion, and it goes back to an old Peter Drucker phrase, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Because that sounds like that sounds like a beautiful phraseology, but at the end of the day, and people could throw roses and flowers about culture eats strategy for breakfast, but we all know that culture may be foundational, but you also need talent and strategy and leadership. It's not just one. You sort of need some combination. Any thoughts to that? Because I've taken the.
I have some thoughts on it. So first, I don't agree with Peter Drucker. Culture does not eat strategy for lunch. Or breakfast, whatever meal it is. That's the problem. Culture is a strategy. So you have a strategy. So you want to expand to a new market, or you want to diversify into a new line of business, right? So that's a strategy, and you figure out, okay, why do you want to do it? How do you want to do it? What resources do you need to do it? What could go wrong if you do it? How do you get people on board with doing it, right? That's a strategy that I want to expand to Nebraska. All right, well, that's a strategy, and there's a game plan for doing it. So culture can't be this sort of, blue sky, or this just, warm and fuzzy thing. It's an actual strategy. I want to build a building. I want to go to a new market. So culture is a strategy, needs a game plan. You need to know how you're going to do it, who needs to do what, how do you allocate resources to it to make it happen. And it can't receive the short shrift, if that's a word.
Let me ask you another question, and it's a bit of a personal question. There's an art to this. You stepped down from CEO well before anybody really wanted you to step down, and there's a beauty to that. Can you talk about the thought process and the timing, and how you think about transitions in leadership and developing the next generation of leadership? Because I love how you handled yourself, and I'd love to get some insight on it for our audience.
Yeah. Well, so the magic is leaving one day too early rather than one day too late. It's sort of like if you go on vacation. When you go on vacation, you want to leave when you wish you had one more day to enjoy it. It's a terrible vacation if you leave, if you're on your last day and you say, I wish I went home yesterday. And sort of that notion of leaving one day early rather than one day too late, it's sort of very personal and very idiosyncratic to the individual and the organization. And it's a little bit of art and a little bit of science and a little bit of luck in getting that right. So my core belief is that while textbook wise succession planning should start the day after you take the job, and I'm sure many organizations do that on paper, and maybe they do it well. I'm not sure. I don't really have experience in other places. But my personal belief is that you generally want to know when people who are working for you have a runway that is 3 years or less, right? Because you may need to recruit, you may need to reorganize, you may need to develop people, and it could take 3 years. And if you know that person X has a 3-year runway, when you develop a game plan for that and a point of view on how you're going to execute against that, when you get to the 2-year mark, you may say, okay, well, it's still 3 years, so you can sort of kick the can down the road. But if it's not 3 years and it's 2 years, then you need to have that plan have a closer line of sight to the end. And it just allows you to transition leadership much more smoothly, passing the baton without any friction or losing any ground. And I applied that to myself as well. So that's sort of the first point. 3 to 5 years, 3 years in advance. When you go public on that, that's very, very unique to the individual in the organization. I think that's the responsibility of the incumbent as well as the incumbent's boss, so to speak. So in the case of the CEO, that's obviously the board, and either the CEO, either the board needs to take responsibility for it, or the CEO needs to take responsibility for it. And one may start before the other, but then they come together on it. So that's sort of the first thing. And the second thing is, while you always cannot find an internal candidate, I think that there's danger in going to the outside. I mean, I was an external candidate, but when you bring in I was an external hire to HSS, but when you bring someone from the outside, you really never know what you're going to get. No matter how much vetting you do, it's a little bit of the roll of the dice. And it also generally results in, well, when a new person comes in, may not work out, number one. Two, it may gum up the works in the beginning, slow people down. Number three, that person may have a totally different view and it changes the organization's direction, which could be good or bad. Ideally, developing internal candidates, looking far enough ahead, developing internal candidates so that there can be smoother transitions. Definitely, again, sometimes you need someone from the outside. Sometimes you need to shake things up, even if it's an internal candidate. But I think developing internal people to maximize the potential for an internally for a transition that has an internal candidate as the successor is ideal. And then, number three is, how, and I got some of this advice from some, close friends. how you leave is how you will be remembered. So you can have a great career, but if you don't leave the organization well, that's how you're going to be remembered. And how you are measured of in terms of how you did while you were there should be, at least in part, how well your successor does. Because if you are leading an organization and you're doing well and the organization is doing well, and then you leave and your successor comes in and the organization doesn't do well, you probably have something to do with that, right? At least in part. So if you're an incumbent CEO, you should be thinking that your success will be measured, at least in part, by how successful your successor is. And that's sort of how I thought about things.
And let's reflect on at least three of the things that you said there. First, I would say that the greatest tribute to Steve Jobs and Bill Gates is how well Apple and Microsoft have done post their exits from leadership. Steve Jobs, unfortunately, due to death, Bill Gates by choice. But the fact that they've succeeded so well afterwards is a great testament to their success as leaders. Second is, you talked about the succession plan, the leadership, the people around you in the organization. You and I both recognize, I think, that if you have incredibly talented and motivated people, they won't wait forever for their opportunity. And if you leave so much later than they're ready, they'll go find other opportunities. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And then third, you had talked about when you bring somebody in laterally to an organization, we've seen this both ways. People that people thought would be the second coming of God and ended up not being good at all. And people that ended up being fantastic that didn't come in with those kinds of expectations. And the point is, you never really know what you have until somebody's really worked with you for some significant period of time. So any thoughts on those second two issues, the concept of people and organizations that are aspiring need opportunities, and second, you really never know what you have until they're working with you. Any thoughts on those?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the first one, I think that's also going to be idiosyncratic to the organization, right? So an organization who has a CEO who's only been there for a few years may have some extraordinarily talented people, or for whatever reason, he or she is not ready to leave for good reasons, and they shouldn't leave. Yeah, how do you give people more responsibility to learn and grow? So going back to culture, and one of the Gallup questions applies to all levels of the organization. Do you have the opportunity to learn and grow? So people who want to aspire to the next level need to have the opportunity to learn and grow. And oftentimes that doesn't require them bumping the CEO out of their role. So you got to make sure that you're giving those people that opportunity. And just thinking about my situation and the people that were around me, they had that opportunity. The fact that one of them was ready was not the reason why I retired when I did, but it certainly made it easier. And it sort of goes back to the responsibility of the organization to develop internal people. Whenever that time comes, you're increasing the probability of it being an internal candidate. So to answer your question specifically, be creative, figure out a way to give them the opportunity to learn and grow and develop and be contributors at a high level without being the CEO. There shouldn't be that many limits on that, but there will be limits eventually. And, sometimes that's how you populate other organizations. So they may need to go, and then whatever they learned in your organization, they can apply elsewhere. So sometimes that's going to happen. And then you go from the outside again. I've seen it. I'm not going to mention organizations or names, but I've seen it where leadership transitions have failed And at least through the lens, through some lens, the problem that the organization has could be attributed in part to it not being the best leadership transition. So I think you may not have an internal person. The internal person may not do well, even though you think they'll do well, although you can do much more due diligence in a pretty sophisticated way on an internal person. And they may succeed or fail. But I just think that if you have the opportunity to optimize it being internal, that's less risky for the organization, in my view.
Oh, thank you very, very much. And Lou, tell me what you're most focused on and excited about this year. I know you're working with several different leaders to help coach them as a board member and more. What are you most excited about this year, outside of course, your beautiful family? And I know you moved closer to, I believe, part of your family. So God bless you. What are you most excited about this year?
Yeah, so my daughter and her husband moved to a suburb outside of Charlotte, and family's important. So we just decided this was a good time to pivot. And so we just moved this past Friday. Still unpacking. But in terms of work, as you indicated, I'm on a number of boards. I'm on 5 boards. I enjoy. You asked me what I'm excited about. I enjoy getting to know the CEO, being sort of a thought partner, mentor, sounding board, just getting to know the CEO and helping him or her as I can. I enjoy getting to know their leadership teams, helping them where I can. And I think what I'm most excited about is how these organizations have the opportunity to be transformative. I hesitate to use that word. That's a whole different podcast thought on what needs to change in the industry. We've been doing this for a long time. And while on one hand, so much has changed, on the other hand, not much has changed. And so something needs to happen differently to get us to where we need to go, but that's a different story. But these organizations have their own unique opportunity to be transformative because they're trained. They're contributing to changing the structure of the industry. That's the primary care company I'm on the board of, People Want Health. Very excited about that. There's the organizations that are partnering with health systems in an area where the company I'm on the board of only has to figure out how to be great at one thing, and the health system has to be great at many things. So I'm excited about those 2 companies, one in the PT business, one in the home care business, who have health system partnerships as their go-to-market strategy, and really can make a difference to a health system's journey along their pathway to whatever they want to accomplish. And then, I'm also on the board of Zimmer Biomet, which traditionally would be called a medical device company, but its involvement with connected health, contributing to enhancing the patient journey for people who have musculoskeletal conditions, is pretty exciting. So 2 things: engagement with the teams and helping where I can help in a productive way, and 2, being connected to organizations that have the opportunity to contribute to the advancement of the industry in a transformative way, not just sort of small incremental change that's hard to measure.
Thank you very, very much. Lou, it's always great to get a chance to visit with you, one of the smartest, most centered leaders I get a chance to visit with. Thank you for joining us on this combined episode of the Becker's Healthcare and Becker Private Equity podcast. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Scott.